friends, welcome back or welcome if you're new here. My name is Stacy and I am the Chapter Conundrum. And in today's video, I'm going to be doing the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 book tag. And I'm not sure who originally created this tag, but I think it was a trend on Book Talk for a while. But anyways, I was tagged to do this by Jordan over at Boiled Jellyfish Reads. So I'll link his video down below for you to go check out. I definitely enjoyed my time watching it. So essentially how today's tag works is I'm going to talk about 5 books that I loved, 4 books that are on my TBR, 3 books I would widely recommend, 2 recent 5-star reads, and 1 book on my currently reading. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into it with the 5 books that I love. And I struggled to narrow this list down to 5 until I realized, okay, I can probably pick out like 5 distinct things that I love about books and then kind of choose a book to sort of exemplify or amplify that specific thing. And that strategy definitely helped me sort of narrow down and choose 5. So the first thing I want to talk about that I really enjoy is introspective and reactive characters that are really going through something tough. And a perfect example of this for me is The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang. So if you don't know, this follows a mother and son duo, Misaki and Mamoru, and they are living on the Sword of Kaigen, which is an isolated, I can't remember if it's an island or a peninsula, but anyways, they are sort of very isolated. They don't really have a good grasp on what's going on in the outside world, and their government is pretty corrupt. And also war is brewing and their nation is about to be attacked. So the first kind of third of this book is pretty slower. You get a lot of info about the world, setup about characters, their situations, a little bit of backstory, about who they were. But then the war breaks out and definitely the action takes hold and has you on a ride. But the climax of this happens pretty early, and the big focus of this book is really the falling action and the fallout from this war. And so that definitely speaks to a character who's, really going through something tough, and they're really telling you how they feel. And it was just really emotional for me to read. I loved my time reading this, even though it wasn't always easy, and I would highly recommend it. So the next thing I really love in a book is a tense, fast-paced plot. And for me, a perfect example of this would be Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. If you don't know, this is a story set in like near future that follows Wade Watts, and it's kind of like in a dystopian society, but virtual reality is prevalent and extremely common. So what started as kind of a gaming world, the Oasis, kind of expanded in scope to encompass a lot more, and everyone is pretty much involved with the Oasis in their day-to-day lives. And the creators of the Oasis hid some interesting clues and Easter eggs within their world and set a prize for whoever can kind of solve all of the clues and figure things out first. And it's been years since, this was announced, and no one's kind of found anything until our main character Wade stumbles across the first clue and triggers what amounts to a crazy, tense race. So based on that premise, you can probably already tell that this definitely encompasses, a tense, faster paced plot. And I also would say I would recommend the audio for this as well. Will Wheaton narrates it, and he definitely adds more tension to the story as well. The other thing I love about this is just the nerdy nostalgia. I mean, it focuses on the 80s, and even though I grew up in the 90s, I had older siblings and older cousins that were born in the 80s, so I still recognized and had experienced a lot of the things that the book mentioned, and so I loved it for that reason too. So another thing that I really love in a good book is really intricate plot work that's well thought out with great foreshadowing in place and good reveals. And a book that really encompasses all of that for me is The Way of Shadows by Brent Weeks. And this is the first book in the Night Angel trilogy. And you follow several POVs. You follow Kylar Stern or Azoth, depending on which identity he's taking on at the time. And he's kind of like a street rat that's part of a guild. So a lot of the beginning of his perspective is kind of how he's surviving on the streets and the guild politics that he's involved in. But he decides that he wants to apprentice under like this master assassin that's well renowned called Durzo Blint. And I think you also get Durzo's POV in here at times too. And obviously, being like a renowned assassin in town, he's definitely involved in knowing people's secrets and why he's hired to take out certain people, all that kind of thing. And then you also get another POV in here, but I'm not really going to tell you much about that one or how it's connected. Just know that the 3 POVs in here are kind of from a different veins of society, and together, having all of their perspectives and experiences really over the course of the trilogy and even just this first book weaves together what is like a multi-level political situation. And it's really interesting to kind of uncover and read all of that. There are just so many things to piece together and figure out in this one that it was such a great time for me. And I will caution though, if you're familiar with Brent Weeks, it's probably because of Lightbringer, and he's kind of known for having a harder magic system and just like an intricate magic system, but this series really doesn't have that, so just don't go in expecting that. There are magical artifacts in this world called Kokari, and they do some interesting things, but it's kind of very soft magic and you really don't uncover a lot about them throughout the books. It's really not the focus of the story. It's just kind of on the side. So just know that going in, and hopefully if you pick this up, you end up enjoying it as much as I did. So another thing that I love in a book is just a very high stakes story with steep consequences. Like, things have costs, things do not go well for the characters necessarily all the time. And one series or book in particular that encompasses that for me is Golden Sun by Pierce Brown. If you know Pierce Brown, he is not afraid to put his characters through the ringer, guys. And Darrow is no exception by any means. So obviously I can't really tell you too much about this particular book, given that it's the second book in a series, but I can tell you about the first book, Red Rising. And Red Rising follows Darrow, who is part of the Red Caste. It's the lowest caste of society, and they're sort of charged with mining helium-3 in order to terraform Mars and the galaxy. But one day Darrow discovers that Mars has already been terraformed and that their caste is essentially kept in slavery under this hoax. And so he kind of gets involved in a plot to go undercover as a Gold, which is the highest caste in society, and sort of infiltrate some of the nobility that are corrupt, and kind of get some revenge and some answers. And obviously Red Rising follows him sort of in like the training academy for Golds, and it's sort of been touted as like Hunger Games in space. I wouldn't necessarily say it's exactly that, but there is more of a deadly competition scenario within the training academy. And then the scope of the story broadens considerably with the second book, and you start to kind of like get a little bit more of the politics of the world in space kind of thing. I will also say that for me, the first time I read Red Rising, it was decent, but it wasn't amazing. But when I picked up Golden Sun, it definitely improved on the things that I had complaints about and became an all-time favorite. So the fifth book that I want to talk about that's been a favorite, and the fifth kind of thing that tends to make me love a book, is kind of a shocking, jaw-dropping moment. And a book that really makes me think of that is Confessions by Kanai Minato. And this is a Japanese thriller, and there's definitely a moment in here, and this is like the only time I can ever remember audibly gasping when I read a book. I'm not going to tell you what it is, when it happens. Just know that this one has some really shocking moments that led to my enjoyment of it being as high as it is. So our premise in this one is we're following a school teacher who is retiring after a tragic accident, and we're following her in her last class, and she's sort of, telling her students that it's going to be her last class and she's retiring. But really the heart of this is sort of uncovering more details surrounding this tragic accident, what happened, how it happened, who contributed to it. And the storytelling style is very unique. So we have, I think, like 5 or 6 chapters in here, and each one follows a different point of view, and sort of every point of view that you follow has something that contributes to weaving the story together. So it was very interesting in that respect as well. But definitely this one reminds me of those jaw-dropping, shocking moments that make me love a book. Next up is 4 books on my TBR, and the first one of those, which was supposed to be read in October but didn't happen because I've been busy, is Extreme Makeover by Dan Wells. And basically all I know about this is that this is a horror that's kind of post-apocalyptic, and the apocalypse is caused by some kind of like cosmetics or cosmetic skincare products type stuff. And that's basically all I want to know going into this. I'm definitely looking forward to getting to it and checking it out, not only because the premise sounds interesting, but also because I've really enjoyed Dan Wells' other main series, the John Cleaver series, starting with I'm Not a Serial Killer. I know that he can write really like high stakes, tense situations very well, and I also tend to enjoy his character voices. So I'm really looking forward to diving into this, and hopefully it lives up to my expectations. Another book on my TBR is Goldfinch by Raven Kennedy, and this is the 6th and final book in the Plated Prisoner series, which is kind of like a dark fantasy romance series. And obviously, you know, things are way different in this book than they started in the series. But essentially, this is kind of like a loose King Midas retelling, and you follow our main character, Oren, who is kind of like a slave to a king in this world. I think there's like 6 or 7 realms. And anyway, he's the king of one of them. And she's kind of like in captivity, almost like she lives in a cage. But then the twist that you find out right at the beginning of the story is, wait a second, she actually wants to be in this cage. She feels protected in there because she feels safe from not having to experience things she's already experienced in the past. And so right away, this series kind of takes your expectations and twists them. And I really enjoyed just reading her perspective, watching her kind of come into her own, realizing and growing and just exploring what she's been through. But also the plot in here and how that all develops is really great. And now that I'm further into the series and like the romance has brewed, essentially, I'm really looking forward to picking up this final book, getting all the answers for things that I want. It's a chunker, and I'm hoping it takes enough time to talk about all the things that were kind of like introduced and woven in subtly throughout the series. So I'm definitely excited to get to this soon. So another anticipated release that I still haven't gotten to is Blood Over Brighthaven by Emma Wong. So you saw me recommend Sword of Kaigan earlier in the video, same author, and this one I've been dying to get to. So I know that it's a standalone and it's not related to Sword of Kaigan at all, but I think from what I know of this, you follow 2 main points of view, and one of them is Siona, and she's kind of like this mage apprentice or a magic student in this main city. I don't know if it's just called Brighthaven or if, no, it's Turan. It says right there, literally. Anyway, so she's kind of testing into a job as like a magic coder, as somebody who like helps pull magic into the atmosphere to be able to do things. And the kicker is that this is typically a male-held job title or position, and not many females are able to use this magic. And so obviously people have issues with her being in this position and are not happy that she's testing in, to say the least. So obviously she's gonna have to deal with some crap, and I'm assuming overcome a lot if she assumedly gets the position. And then the other point of view we follow in here is of a refugee that kind of comes to the city, and the beginning talks about sort of the adversity he and his tribe sort of faced in journeying to Brighthaven and why they did so. I'm assuming that these 2 are gonna meet up in the city over the course of events in here, and I don't really know what's gonna happen from there, but it's gonna be really interesting to read and find out. And the 4th book I'm going to mention that's on my TBR is Jade City, the first book in the Green Bone Saga by Fonda Lee. And this is actually going to be a reread for me. I read book 1 back in, I think 2020, and this was before Jade Legacy had released. And so I kind of decided, okay, well, I'm going to hold off in reading Jade War until all 3 of them are out. But then, you know, things happened and I never even got to Jade War. So I, at this point, need to reread the series in order to continue and finish it out. And I did enjoy this when I read it the first time, but I was also very new to reading fantasy, and so I'm very curious to see how my experience of this book and this story changes on reread. And you guys have also chosen this as a series for me to prioritize. A while ago I did a which series should I prioritize you decide video, and Greenbone Saga was overwhelmingly the one chosen in the comments of that. So definitely I'm going to be prioritizing getting to it sooner rather than later, and I'm looking forward to jumping into a reread and finishing out the series this time. So on to 3 books that I would recommend. I kind of struggled to choose these as well, but then I ended up deciding to go with, things that I had rated very highly that I really enjoyed that are kind of like underhyped, or maybe not necessarily everyone has already read them. And so the first one of those is going to be Requiem for a Star by U.G. Gutman, and this is a novella in the Dawnless Night universe, so same series as Winds of Strife. But you do not have to have read Winds of Strife to dive into this, get the full experience, and enjoy it. And in fact, I didn't read Winds of Strife before reading this. This does a very good job of kind of catching you up to speed on things if you don't already know this world. And it follows sort of the backstory and formative years of one of the main characters in Winds of Strife. But you also mainly follow Nova, and she is sort of like coming of age, and this is a very like profound and thought-provoking story. This kind of follows her as she's exposed to a variety of life experiences for the first time. But it's fun to follow her because she is very independent in her thinking, and she's not afraid to break the mold and challenge things and test things and kind of like question why this is the norm sort of deal. And it just makes her very endearing and interesting. But the main reason I'm going to recommend this one is that I was just kind of awed at like the emotional depth that is kind of conveyed through this story. Definitely, if you read this, make sure to read the author's note at the end because it definitely adds to the experience. And I also just thought that this was a very great example of someone who can convey a lot of meaning with so few words. Like, there would be a short description of something in here, and then immediately I would have like a fleshed out picture of something in my brain based on that description. And I think like that's kind of an underrated talent when it comes to writing, but I definitely appreciate it, and I definitely recommend it for that reason. So another book that I'm going to recommend is Hyperbole and a Half by Ali Broche, and this is definitely one of the more unique reading experiences I've ever had. So first of all, this is kind of like a nonfiction memoir involving snippets of Allie's life, either growing up or as an adult. And she just has this way about her where she gets to the heart of a story or like a moment, and she makes something so relatable but also so funny. And the other reason that this is so unique, other than her voice, is just that it's like kind of a graphic novel mixed with a novel. So I'll show you what I mean. So there are like snippets of like text in between sort of like the graphics, so you can get an idea. But yeah, so definitely this led to a very unique reading experience, and had so many laugh out loud funny moments, also so many relatable moments, and it also went a long way into kind of describing experiences that people have that maybe like I hadn't had, and some that I had. But yeah, just very relatable, very funny, and a unique experience. Overall, would definitely recommend. And the third book I'm going to recommend is Dolores Claiborne by Stephen King. And while Stephen King is, wildly popular and well known, I wouldn't necessarily say that Dolores Claiborne is one of his like most read books. But of the ones I have read, and I think I'm close to about 20 of them, this is by far my favorite so far. And in this, you follow Dolores Claiborne, shocker, right? And she's kind of a middle-aged lady who is a caretaker to this really like older, well-off lady. But that lady turns up dead, and Dolores is arrested on suspicion of her murder. So right away you're opening with like her in the police station and trying to get to the bottom of like what happened. But a lot of this is also about Dolores's like home and family situation in life and experiences. But what makes this so great is Dolores herself. Just like she will describe you like what she's doing that day, or like some scenario she's been through, but she's so funny. Like, I did not expect this to be funny based on the premise, but yeah, this had me cackling in moments, and it was just very, very enjoyable. Highly recommend this one. So next up, we're going to talk about 2 recent 5-star reads. And one of those for me is Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. And this is kind of like a very gritty sort of thriller that follows 2 dads, one white and one black, and their sons were married to each other, so they were a gay couple, and they were murdered. And so in this book, they're sort of looking for answers as to like why specifically their sons were targeted. Was it because they were an interracial gay couple? Like, were they involved in something else? What happened? Who killed them? And like, why? So this kind of starts out as more of a mystery and then sort of turns into more of a thriller, I would say. And it definitely has notes of revenge, which I always love in a book. And these 2 characters are very interesting to follow, but also the story is great. And there's a larger social conversation that happens sometimes very like, you know, it's out there, and then other times very subtly. And so I thought it was very well handled, and just the writing in here is great, the characters are great, the story is great. Like, you really can't go wrong. I would definitely recommend this. So the other 5-star read that I'm going to recommend here is What Have You Done by Sherry LaPena. And this is a story that opens with a bang. So you're following kind of a farmer, and he's just out doing his normal stuff in the morning, but he comes across the body of a dead girl in his field, and it's one of his neighbors. Like, this is a very small town in Vermont, so everyone kind of knows everybody, and so it's very shocking because it's more of like a sleepy town, nothing ever happens here kind of deal. And so mainly this is like a whodunit situation, but the reason that I loved this was A, the pacing was fantastic, there was kind of never a dull moment, but B, the reason it was so great was that Sherry LaPena really put a lot of thought and intention into, you know, cultivating a lot of possible suspects for this and making each one of them very credible. So normally when I read one of these like types of mystery thrillers, I'm kind of like, oh yeah, I think it was this person for this reason. And then maybe the reveal kind of comes out of left field, or maybe it kind of is predictable and it's who I thought all along. But in this one, I really was kind of waffling. Like, there were really like 4, maybe even 5 suspects that I thought were extremely credible that definitely could have done this, and definitely was very well thought out and very well done. This is definitely a bingeable, like, one sitting kind of book, and I hope that if you pick it up, you enjoy it as much as I did. And then the last one is just one book on you're currently reading, and I actually am only in the middle of one book right now, and that is The Sundown Motel by Simone St. James. And so far I think the beginning has kind of started off a bit slow for me, but I'm hoping that it picks up in pace a bit. And this is kind of the story of 2 women set decades apart. One in the early 80s, you're following Viv, and she's kind of like a girl who, you know, wanted to get out of home, so she did, and she, on her way to New York City, sort of found herself in Fell, New York. And she ends up kind of setting herself up here a little bit, taking on a job as the night clerk at the Sundown Motel. And she ends up disappearing. So years and years later, her niece, who's never met her, is very curious as to what happened to her, and kind of is like trying to figure that out and investigate, you know, more about her aunt's life and disappearance. So she eventually gets, you know, in the direction of the Sundown Motel as well, and she ends up also taking the night clerk job there. And definitely it's interesting to see, you know, like what kind of things are happening at this hotel at night. There's definitely some paranormal elements to this story, but there definitely is more going on here too, and I'm curious to keep reading and uncover the answers and the solutions. So now that we're done talking about all the books I chose, let's talk about who I'm going to tag to do this next. I would like to tag Amanda from Reading and Writing Life. I'm very curious to see what she's going to recommend and what books she chooses and what she has to say. I'm also going to choose Already Overbooked, and this is a new channel from somebody who's been around on Jake's and my Discord for a long time. So I'm curious to also see what they say and sort of get a better feel for their reading tastes overall. And I would also like to go ahead and tag Nala from Here There Be Stories. I'm also very curious to see what books she chooses and why she chooses them. So I'm hoping that you guys are leaving today's video with a book recommendation of something you're very curious to check out. Let me know down below in the comments if I've convinced any of you to pick any of these up. And if so, hopefully you enjoy them. Thank you guys so much for watching, and hope you have a great day. Bye!